Good morning, and thank you for this for joining us at this session. Out of interest, how many of you are aware of the MIT study on the efficiency of AI implementations? Good one. So there was a study from MIT, it was published in August, late August, and it was based on 150 interviews with leaders, how successful they were in installing AI solutions. And the outcome was 5% were successful. Deriving from that question, what is the most important thing, Lambert, that businesses need to think about when they think about implementing AI?
Yeah, I think there seems to be a lot of hype around AI, and you sort of have to do it because there's pressure from your shareholders, there's pressure from your board. Employees are adopting it personally, whether you like it or not. So I think a lot of companies are jumping into AI without really realizing, why are we doing this? What are the objectives of this AI project? And of course, that's a poor way to start. It doesn't mean that you can't get some results, but I think really realizing, why are we doing this, and what is the best way to get something out of AI? I think that question is not asked enough.
I think the question the question why AI applies to the whole of the company. What is your experience on that, David?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's no shortage of opportunities. I mean, you can do lots of things with AI. The AI we have today is kind of a Swiss Army knife, but I think the issue is really the implementation of it, the pitfalls, the strengths and weaknesses. You have to understand that very well to understand where it's going to be deployed. And I think to your point, Lambert, that this sort of check the box exercise, a lot of people are like, okay, the board says you got to do this, go out and do it, let's find the quickest way we can do that. That's going to eventually yield to a more mature, hey, these are places where it's safer for us to play. It's not facing our customers perhaps, it's more, perhaps we can learn, we can develop, or we're going to use this for developer productivity on one hand. It's actually, a part of the problem I think is that AI and generative AI isn't just one thing or for one use case, and they really have to be understood in the context of the business and the business strategy and their own technical merits as well.
What I heard is that very often it's like the CIO who has the role to decide on where do we start with implementing AI, but I think your point of view is also that we have to include the full C-suite to create a business strategy around AI.
Yeah, I think a lot of the use of AI right now is probably what I would call tactical. Lots of efficiencies, and I'm not saying that that's not good. Of course, you find efficiencies in your company, that's great, you save some money. So it's about giving the employees access to AI tools to make their work more efficient. It's about replacing some customer interaction with a chatbot that can serve more customers every day, 24/7, and that saves costs. These kind of things, I call that all tactical. I think what many companies are not realizing is that AI is fundamentally changing the whole business landscape, and they need to look at it from the perspective of their business strategy. Is their entire business model still valid in this day and age of AI?
Excellent. What I also think is, I mean, a company exists of employees. We all work there. We all support that. So there's two things happening from what I've seen at the moment. One is we have like a shadow AI economy because employees are bringing in their private accounts for any AI solution that they have. They use it not within the context of the company. And the second thing we're hearing is work slop. So we're creating a lot of additional work because we're using AI tools that are not streamlined to what a company needs to have. David, can you share how we can solve that conundrum?
Well, let me give you a prescription for how we can solve that entire problem. Well, I mean, I think the first thing, you mentioned shadow AI, which is an analogy to shadow IT. People are bringing their own tools. If you don't give them tools, they're going to bring them from home. And those tools may or may not be things that you would want to have in your enterprise, in your workflow. Like everything from models that you don't trust to data practices, using sending your data that might be very sensitive to, SaaS endpoints that you may or may not be comfortable with. So you have to give people the tools that they want. And then you also have to be skilling up. It's sort of, the whole field is kind of like a best of times, worst of times, haves and have-nots kind of thing, where for every problem, there's almost the opposite problem existing simultaneously. You have early adopters who can't be stopped from bringing ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to work with them. They just think it's normal. To people who are scared of these tools, don't know how to use them, aren't familiar with them. And bringing everyone together in that's going to be really important. And I think this will normalize over time, but you just have to meet the needs of both of those groups. So education on one side and giving them the tools on the other.
Yeah, what I'm also thinking is that you talked about the business strategy. I mean, companies need to see how does it align to the values that my company stands for, the history that I have, the brand that I have, and then pick the right solutions according to following through with the brand that you have.
Yeah, and I think things are moving so fast at the moment. It's difficult for companies to adopt AI in a way that doesn't destroy their relationship with their customers, what they stand for as a company, that doesn't destroy the internal company culture, and that takes a lot of change management to do that. As to the previous point about employees adopting AI, it's very contradictory. I see two things happening at once. On the one hand, employees are discovering all these online tools, and they say, oh, I need to write a report or an email or something, and this tool can help me write that report more easily. And massively, they're starting to adopt that and do that. And companies are like, well, okay, we need to put some guardrails in this, whatever. We need to control this a little bit. At the same time, there's companies that are implementing AI as part of processes. And now they have agentic AI, and they take the role of humans in a process. So you have a process with maybe 10 steps, and there's 5 different skills involved, 5 different humans, and maybe 2 of them are replaced by an AI agent. And there was an interesting study done. It was published in Harvard Business Review last year, where they did that in some companies. And the interesting result was that the employees that were in a process that also included parts of AI, their productivity went down because they got demoralized. They didn't trust the AI. They didn't trust that if they handed over their part of the process to that AI, that anything good would come out of it. And where they got something from AI, they didn't trust that it was the right data. So their productivity actually went down. And I think that element of trust is something that's very important, both internally, so that your employees trust the AI that you're using, but also externally. You don't want your customers to lose trust in your company because you're starting to automate things, or maybe even violate the sort of agreements you have with them about their data privacy, about how they're being treated.
I'd like to follow up on the point that you're just making is there's different studies out there as well. There's one that says people that are very AI literate tend to overestimate their capabilities. So that has an impact on business strategy. And the second one is employees who are hesitant to use AI are afraid of speaking to their leadership about this. Third one I would like to add is the change in leadership in managing hybrid teams. Because all of a sudden, you talk about agentic AI, you have humans, and then you have an AI agent as a team member. Do you have experience how leadership can handle the hybrid teams? And
yeah, I would personally caution everyone from anthropomorphizing this technology too much and treating it like team members, because at least at this stage of the game, these are tools, not friends, like or not colleagues as much. And one of the things that's really difficult about generative AI as a technology is it just hits right in the sweet spot of our own cognitive weaknesses, where if something is speaking fluently, you want to believe that it's true. So on one hand, you do have people that don't trust the technology, and then on the other hand, this is this weird polarization that we keep seeing across everything in AI. We have people who are very easily lulled into believing that this is intelligent at a level it isn't. And one of the things I find myself saying a lot these days is that the second most remarkable thing about LLMs and generative AI is that they can understand and produce fluent natural language, but the most remarkable thing is that they're wrong between 5 and 50% of the time. It's actually a shockingly high error rate on even the very top, biggest models. So everyone needs to, especially developers who are trying to develop these agentic solutions, needs to really take a step back and evaluate how do we deal with a system that's amazing but unreliably amazing. And I think that's a lot of the trouble that folks are having with the 95% failure rate on deploying agentic solutions. I mean, on one hand, we have user productivity, but on the other hand, we have developers trying to harness this technology, and it's very easy to miss getting that right in terms of the non-functional requirements.
Okay, let's assume we've solved that.
Okay.
So we figured out why do we want to use it, how to involve the team members, how to get the buy-in, the value of the solution. There's also the next step, how do we implement it? What kind of systems do we need? What kind of systems are we using? How do we go about the risk assessment? What are the most important things you would say that companies need to consider when deciding which systems to use as a next step for the implementation?
Yeah, I think it's a very important point to not only look at the opportunities of using AI, but looking at the risk as well. And it's probably harder than you think, because the immediate implications of AI you can sort of oversee, but the sort of the secondary and the tertiary effects of using AI are sometimes difficult to foresee. And there are risk management models, impact models. In the UN, obviously, we work with people all around the world, and we want to see how these stakeholders are affected by our decisions to use AI. And you have to really think through that step by step. And we do AI ethical impact assessments. And there's techniques to do that, but it takes work. It's hard. Yeah.
But you don't have to do it alone, right? I mean, there are frameworks for it. Yep. I mean, we have something called Risk Atlas Nexus, which is an online open tool. You can go and basically talk about what you're doing, and it'll surface risks for you. And I think it's an emerging field for sure, and it absolutely takes work, but you don't have to invent it from scratch. And I think even just at this stage of the game, diffusion of knowledge of what's available, what frameworks are available, is, we all need just to learn and start using these things and contributing to them.
I think it also highly depends on which area we are in, because if we're in a high regulated area, we have different things to consider. Also, from a customer perspective, an example that comes to my mind is a rental car company employed AI to check the return vehicles. And what they found was that the AI was more accurate than humans had been before. But this also meant that the clients had to pay, because there was a little scratch in the car that the human might have overlooked, but the AI found it. So there was a huge backlash from the clients who said, we're going to be ripped off. I think that's one part of the risk assessment. How accurate does a system need to be? And it has failure rates. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we won't make it 100% at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then for me, the next step comes, what kind of solution do we employ? Is it a standard LLM off the shelf that we can adapt? Or do we go for small language models? David, what's your take?
I think the key thing in all of this is to put in a measurement framework so you know what good looks like, and then try and remain as agile as you can. This technology is moving ridiculously fast, and we've seen customers, a very common pattern is you'll start with a very capable but expensive model to start with. It's easy to get going. And then we see customers actually going down and replacing that gradually with small models that are more affordable, more specific to what they're trying to do. And the only way you can make that journey is if you measure, if you have a way to evaluate, is this working as well? like, is this meeting my business KPI? So, I mean, I think to the point about business strategy, defining what it is that you're trying to achieve here, not just, it can't be just placate the board. It has to be, what business goal are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to save money? Are we trying to get a new opportunity? Defining that, measuring that, having a framework, and then being nimble such that you aren't locked in. Because I think the most dangerous thing people can do right now is get into a mode of having lots of technical debt against one particular solution. I think you have to remain agile. And that's one of the reasons why we're very committed to open source and open weight models in this space, because it gives customers a lot more option value. So I think it's going to be critical as this changes.
So what would typical areas be, if you can say like that, where it makes sense to use an SLM, to create one on their own, to create an SLM based on the data that the company owns?
Well, I mean, I think what we're finding, actually, if you haven't been following the sort of detailed sort of progression of the field, about I would say every 6 months, something you could do in a model of a particular size can be done 6 months later with a model 10 times smaller, and therefore 10 times cheaper to run. And then meanwhile, the hardware is getting more and more efficient. So things that we used to consider doing with frontier models, we can do with very tiny models today. So, and that's not even a question of bringing your own data. You can also do that. So there's just a compression that's happening, and there's a constantly changing market. I think there's very few things that with a little bit of work you can't get working with a relatively small model. But people want to get that first MVP as quickly as possible. And I don't blame them for, like, use something big in general, get an MVP, show it to the board. But then if you're going to make that thing cost effective, you're going to have to get it down into smaller models, which just requires a little bit more care in how you craft your prompts. Maybe you bring some data, maybe you don't. But almost a lot of things can be brought down to that level. And you just keep whatever you need to keep, you keep in the more expensive models.
So what are the implications from the business side when you decide on make or buy for AI solutions? What would you think we need to consider? Not just the technical side, but the...
I think some of the considerations are cost, sovereignty, in some cases, privacy. Many organizations do not want to have their data hosted or flowing outside of their company. And I think what David also mentions, very important, not to lock yourself in to one big system, because things are changing so rapidly. You want the modular systems so that 6 months from now, you can replace one component with another. But yeah, smaller systems, sovereignty, meaning you own your own systems. You're not dependent. You don't lock yourself in with big vendors. I think that's important.
Okay. So I think we have time for 2 comments, one from each. Like maybe an advice, best methods, whatever. What would be the key message that you would like to share? What helped you from your experience?
I would just repeat the message: evaluate, measure, figure out how to measure the thing, whether it's working or it's not working, and just relentlessly measure.
Well, I think if we all look back 5 years from now, and hopefully we did the right things, then I think that the thing that we want to be able to say is that we made conscious choices, and we didn't just jump into AI with blindfolds on. That we were intentional about how we adopted AI.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you both for all the insights you shared. Thank you for joining us.